Hi, it's me, your host, Deanna. Just wanted to give you a quick heads up that there was a slight audio issue that impacts part of today's interview. But this is a conversation that you don't want to miss. So please bear with us and give it a listen. Okay, now let's get to the episode.
I don't feel that struggle as much anymore because I'm proud of myself for being sober and being present. And so I feel okay saying no to things. I feel okay saying to my kids, I'm done. I can't handle another minute of this. I'm so proud every day to be free of alcohol. And that has changed my life.
Welcome to Season of Stuck, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the all too human experience of feeling stuck. I'm your host, Deanna deBara, and on this podcast, we explore all things stuck. How and why stuckness happens, what it feels like, how to learn and grow from it, and ultimately, how to get unstuck and move forward in an authentic, empowered way. If you are looking for insights, support, and community as you make your journey from stuck to unstuck, you're in the right place. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Well, hello, everyone. How is everyone doing? I hope you are all well. I hope you're having an amazing day. If this is your first time listening, welcome to Season of Stuck. I'm so happy that you're here. If you are a person that has felt or currently feels stuck in your life, you are in the right place, and we are so happy to have you. And if this isn't your first time listening, welcome back. I am so grateful that you are continuing to be here and be a part of this community. Thank you. It really means so much. So, jumping into today's topic. As I've mentioned before, I am a person that has felt stuck a lot, hence the podcast. But today we are going to talk about the thing that has made me by far the most stuck in my life, and that is alcohol. Just to give you a little bit of history, I drank problematically for about 6 years, from the time I was 19 until I was 25. I had drank before that, but my early drinking was pretty in line with what most people would consider quote unquote normal experimentation. In high school, we would beg friends' older siblings to score us some sort of cheap, generally flavored alcohol, which we would then sip on at parties. And while I certainly felt the effects of alcohol, it never got out of control. And even when I got to college, my drinking was pretty tame to start. Well, there were certainly nights I drank to excess. For the most part, I'd stick to a few drinks per party. And if there was something important that I had to do, like study for a test or finish up a project, I had zero problem saying no to the parties and the booze in favor of getting things done. But that all changed at the beginning of sophomore year. At that time, I experienced some back to back heartbreaks, and my relationship with my boyfriend, who I had started dating my junior year of high school and loved in that way that you can only love someone when you don't know what it's like to get your heart broken, ended when I found out that he had cheated. And right around that same time, there was some drama that caused a pretty big rift in my family. And all of a sudden, cousins that felt like siblings and relatives that felt like second parents were gone from my life. I felt confused and lonely and unlovable and stupid and all sorts of things that I didn't want to feel. And that's when I discovered that for me, alcohol was a ticket out of those feelings. When I drank, I didn't have to think about how devastated I was by my breakup or how worried I was that I would never be able to trust anyone again or whether my family would ever look the way that it used to. And so I drank and I drank and I drank and I drank. I was using alcohol as a way to avoid feelings and experiences that I perceived as bad or overwhelming or sad. But ironically, the more I drank, the more feelings and experiences came up that I wanted to avoid. I would get drunk, do something obnoxious or embarrassing, and then wake up with so much shame and guilt. The only solution in my head was to start drinking away those feelings as well. And I got really stuck. I got stuck in this cycle of drinking for 6 long years. And the further I progressed into my addiction, the more stuck I became. I couldn't hold a job. My bank account was overdrawn. My relationships were in absolute shambles. I was sick all the time. I tried and failed to cut back on my drinking more times than I can count. I didn't know who I was or what I was doing, and there wasn't a single thing in my life that I was proud of. In other words, I was in the throes of a full blown alcohol use disorder, which the National Institute on Alcohol Use and Alcoholism defines as a medical condition characterized by an impaired ability to stop or control alcohol use despite adverse social, occupational, or health consequences. Check, check, and check. Now, at a certain point, I knew that I needed to stop. I recognized that virtually every problem in my life was a result of how much and how often I was drinking, and that if I ever wanted to get unstuck, I would have to do it without alcohol. But I was so scared. Not only was I scared to face 6 years worth of feelings and experiences that I had been drinking to avoid, but as petty as it sounds, I was also scared that if I stopped drinking, that was it, that the fun part of my life was over. Not that my drinking was very fun, particularly at the end, but I held on to this belief that alcohol made life more exciting, full, passionate. And if I could only stop drinking so much and so often, I could tap into that excitement, fullness, and passion. But here's the thing, I couldn't stop drinking so much and so often. And yet I was so afraid that if I stopped completely, that exciting, full, passionate life would be permanently out of reach. And that fear kept me drinking well after I admitted to myself that my drinking days were numbered. But eventually, there was no denying that my only choices were stop drinking or die early. And so I quit. On December 31st, 2009, I went to treatment and I haven't had a drink since. Now, obviously, it wasn't as simple as I quit. Giving up drinking was complex and challenging and beautiful and scary and so many different things all at once. But looking back, it was hands down one of the best decisions I have ever made in my life. And all of those fears that I had, that my life wouldn't be fun or full or exciting or passionate, they could not have been any more unfounded. My life today is so fun and full and exciting and passionate. It's also joyful and challenging and emotional and adventurous and purposeful, connected, frustrating. It's everything compared to when I was drinking, when it was only the one thing. I wish I could go back in time and tell the 2009 version of myself, the lonely, lost, drunk, stuck version, how full and beautiful and lush her life would be once she put down the bottle, that she would fall in love, travel the world, eat amazing food, dance until dawn, raise two incredible dogs, laugh for hours around a dinner table with friends who would become family, and so many other things. And she would do them all without alcohol. And for anyone listening that may be struggling with alcohol right now, I say the same thing, that giving up drinking is not the end of a life of excitement and adventure and joy and lushness. It's actually just the beginning. And that's a message that today's guests not only experience for themselves, but are dedicated to sharing with others and helping them discover just how lush life can be without alcohol. Jardine Libaire and Amanda Eyre Ward are celebrated authors, each with an impressive collection of books, including Jardine's White Fur and Here Kitty Kitty, and Amanda's The Jet Setters, a New York Times bestseller, and the upcoming Lovers and Liars. They're also the co authors of Sober Lush, a hedonist guide to living a decadent, adventurous, soulful life, alcohol free, which is a roadmap for people who want to create a sensual, lush, even hedonistic life, just without a drink in their hand. In our conversation, we talk about the misconceptions around sobriety that keep people stuck in unhealthy drinking patterns, and how embracing the sober, lush lifestyle can help you live the fullest version of your life, no alcohol required. Let's jump into my conversation with Jardine and Amanda. Jardine, Amanda, welcome to Season of Stuck. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
I am so excited for this conversation and to kind of dive into the sober lush concept and what that actually means. But before we do that, I would love to kick things off if you could each introduce yourself to listeners and share a bit about what inspired you to write Sober Lush.
So I'm Amanda Eyre Ward. I am primarily a novelist, although I've started travel writing, which is, I think, because of my sobriety, I have more time and energy and brain space. But when I first got sober, about 10 years after I should have gotten sober, I felt that I didn't know how to envision a life without alcohol. It felt kind of bleak and dark, and I went to a lot of basement AA meetings. And then a friend introduced me to Jardine, who's had such a beautiful, seemingly beautiful sober life that I still remember going to Jardine's house for the first time, and she made me a fantastic cup of coffee, and she had jazz playing and incense burning, and I thought, okay, this is what I want. And so as we got to know each other, we talked about how we were both looking for a lush life in sobriety.
That sounds like such a vibe. And thank you so much for sharing, Amanda. What about you, Jardine? Where did this inspiration for writing the Sober Lush come from?
I'm a novelist also, so I think it came partly from trying to make a narrative out of this kind of amorphous problem and solution pairing that I never could understand and couldn't get my head around. So writing the book was wildly therapeutic and helpful, I think, to me, to us, as we not only wrote it, but discussed it together. Amanda and I, when we met, we both were, I think, similarly minded in terms of feeling like we were too late. Like we had known early on in our lives that the drinking that we were doing was destructive. It wasn't really leading to what we thought it was leading to, but we constantly embraced like the romance of it, thinking that was hedonism, drinking was pleasure and reward and connection. So I think the book was about redefining something and building it so that people who maybe were us 20 years ago could see like there is something on the other side. Don't be terrified that you're going to jump off the cliff and there's nothing. There is a life to live and it's really beautiful. It can be.
And I think that touches on such an important concept, which is kind of the misconceptions people often have around drinking and abstinence and what that means. I know for me, I drank at least a year or two longer than I probably should have because I had this idea that once I stopped drinking, that was it. I was never going to have fun again. I was never going to feel celebratory again. I was never going to feel sexy again. Like it was just going to be a transition into this boring, bland, vanilla life. And that really prevented me from taking the jump, even though my life when I was drinking was anything but sexy and celebratory and fun. It was terrible. So, in your experience, what are some of the misconceptions that you think people have about sobriety and giving up drinking that could keep them stuck in unhealthy drinking patterns?
Jardine and I have talked about this a lot, and especially in the writer artistic community, there's this sense that it's boring to be sober, like that boring person at the party. And that misconception still bugs me because maybe externally, it does seem like I'm a little quieter. I choose very carefully what parties I want to go to. I choose who I'm talking to. I leave if I'm check in with myself and I'm not having fun. So I think that misconception that it's boring is one piece, but I also felt like quitting was saying I had been doing something wrong. And so I stuck with it for a long time because of the shame around the acknowledgement that I had not been doing that well. I mean, especially as a mom, it's very hard to say, you know what, I was at this party with my kids and that was not okay. And I don't want to do that anymore. Because once you say that, there's a lot at stake. But then you get through that little by little, and you have the Halloween that you are the parent. I write about this the year that I took the kids trick or treating because I was sober and the conversations were kind of going nowhere with the adults. And instead of having another glass of wine, I connected to my kids and took them trick or treating. And I think, it's hard. And I sound judgmental, but it was more judgmental of myself. So, yeah, that misconception that you can't quit, even if, you don't have to keep going this way. You can change everything.
It's like the idea of once you say it out loud, that makes it true. And then you have to kind of deal with all of the repercussions of that realization and that admitting, hey, I have a problem.
Yes.
Jardine, what about for you?
I think, Amanda, what you were saying about, in a writer's artistic community, there's a huge stigma around sobriety, actually. You'd think it would be the other way, but I think it's stronger around sobriety than it is about addiction. And it has to do with this myth that it's rock and roll and wild and pure and extreme. In a lot of little nooks and crannies that I'd visited socially in my life, it was not just drinking, but substances in general, that you were supposed to be crazy, be out of control. Like if you were in control, then you were going to be, as Amanda said, boring. You're going to be uptight. These were things that terrified me. And I don't think I even admitted them to myself because it has a lot to do with like ego and identity. And I think I didn't even want to admit that I cared what people thought. But I think a lot of caring about that kind of thing was at the root of not moving on. And I was single when I finally got sober at the age of 40. For me, there was an idea that I'd never date again, or that there was no way to fall in love. I mean, I was really good at falling in love at last call at a bar. That was like my routine, and I didn't really know another way to do it. So I couldn't have been more wrong. I dated more, I don't want to say truthfully, but more candidly, more earnestly than I did when I was a mess, and ended up marrying the sober person that I met, shortly after getting sober. So
There is, I think, this tendency to romanticize alcohol in our culture, that when people think of life's most beautiful and enriching moments, like falling in love, like celebrating a birthday or a wedding, or being artistic and creativity, that it's the alcohol that empowers those things, that it's the alcohol that makes those moments special. And that, as you said, is just simply not true for many of us. So let's jump into the concept of being a sober lush. What exactly does that mean to you?
Well, I wanted to say when you mentioned the romance and the mystique around alcohol in specific, that one thing Jardine and I both realized is that we are people who are seeking the glitter, the fun, the wild, adventure. And so we talk about how we had to kind of like forensically examine when we got sober what was missing, in fact. Because for a while, I mean, for a year or two, I went back and forth, back in and out, and I was trying to live my same life, but without alcohol. And when I thought more about, well, what am I missing when I really, really want that glass of wine? For me, a lot of the excitement around travel, for example, or feeling dislocated, or honestly, I'm kind of a nervous person. And so putting myself in situations where I was super uncomfortable, those were things that were really hard to do sober. And so being a sober lush for me it's just an extra step that now is completely ingrained into my mind. I'll get invited to something, I'll think, for example, my husband and I, one night we're going out to dinner in Houston with our favorite, it's a city we go to once in a while. We have a place we love martinis. Well, I wasn't going to have a martini. And so instead of just saying, oh, I'll just go to dinner without the martini, I thought, well, what would give me that same rush of relaxation and pleasure? And I found a little day spa for a foot rub before dinner. So we snuck into there, and it gave us the same kind of giggly feeling of connection, of a new adventure. And we showed up to dinner, without martinis, and that it's worth the extra step, and it keeps me happy. And that's being a sober lush.
That's beautiful. And let me just say, I also agree that there is pretty much nothing better than getting like a great foot massage. So
It's true.
definitely take that over a martini any day of the week. What about you, Jardine?
along those lines, yeah, it's just rethinking what is certain basic things. And that's actually how we divided up the book. Like, what is pleasure? What is partying? I had a hard time letting go of like, I still want to have like transgressive experiences, like big extreme experiences. Like, there was a way after a huge bender that I would feel alive. I would feel destroyed, but also alive. And I wanted to find a way to keep the alive part and let go of the totally destroyed part. But yeah, pleasure just in the most basic way. Like, I thought pleasure was having a drink. I would go down to Miami a lot in my 20s. I lived in New York City, and I thought of those as hedonistic trips, and they were huge benders. And they also were about swimming and sun and dancing. And I would eventually look back and think like 90% of that trip, I had a migraine. I was so sick, I couldn't even eat. My nervous system was shredded. But our culture really is based so much around alcohol and the idea that dismiss all those feelings, dismiss your headache, dismiss the fact that you feel like you're about to fall apart. You're having a great time because you're drunk. So just redefining pleasure from the ground up. Like, I want to feel good. I don't want to feel ill. I want to enjoy the sun and the swimming and the food and the foot massage without interference.
I was just in Miami like 4 or 5 days ago, and I left a big cocktail party because it was crowded. I was uncomfortable, and I was feeling kind of like a loser. And I walked outside, and I realized the beach was 3 blocks away. So I went to the beach by myself and walked all the way to the water, took off my shoes, and put my feet in the water. And I was like, this is better than the party. And I never would have left if I was drinking. I would have, I don't know, stayed all night long. But yeah.
Ugh. I had a very similar experience to both of you, to what both of you are talking about. When I was drinking, I was seeking certain things. I was seeking pleasure. I was seeking connection. I am a person with a lot of anxiety. I was seeking comfort. And in the moment, I thought that alcohol was giving me those things. But once I stopped drinking and the dust kind of settled from my 6+ years of just nose to the grindstone, drink, 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 I realized that it would give me like a momentary artificial version of those things. But then the second that the drunk experience wore off, I was not just right back to where I started from, but worse off. And my journey from being like just a lush to a sober lush has been about finding those replacements. Like, hey, I'm feeling really anxious. What is it that I actually need to comfort myself right now? I am meeting this person. Like, how do I want to connect? How do I want to show up in this moment? And it has been challenging for sure in many ways, particularly when I first stopped drinking. But what it's given me is that those experiences of pleasure, of connection, of joy are no longer artificial and fleeting. They're genuine and they stick with me and kind of become a part of my overall experience. And it's like a really amazing thing.
Love that.
Also, connection. I mean, sober connection is so important because it can be lonely, and so surrounding with yourself with people who get it and are doing a similar thing makes a big difference, I think. I mean, I would call Jardine. I have called Jardine like when I hit a point that I think, oh God, I need to drink. It's like I call Jardine.
Mhm.
Not that she's my sponsor, but just sharing it makes it better.
And there's also, I think, at least for me, and I'm curious if this was true for both of you as well, there's also an element when I was drinking that I wanted to connect, but I wasn't actually myself. So all of my efforts for connection, no one could see me because I didn't even know who I was. And so no matter how hard I would try, that connection would just escape me.
I think that's, again, part of the whole mythology is like you're raw and open when you're drunk. And a lot of times, what I would be is almost having an out of body experience. Like I was totally separated. And that the shy part of me, that's how I got to socialize when I first started drinking heavily at 18. That's how I was able to finally like send her out into the bar and like be almost separate from my own self. And I can still, sometimes I'll just be at a bar and or a restaurant and you can see somebody doing that. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see. And I think the idea of connection and the fact that it's so deeply rooted in our society to drink to connect is something that I wish had been spoken about more candidly when I was trying to get sober, because the size and impact of that is massive and it is hard to combat. And I think it helps a lot to discuss it.
Absolutely.
I still have a hard time walking into a party by myself. It's really hard for me, or standing alone. And I really just, for better or for worse, I don't. I don't go, except certain groups of friends who I have sought out. And I really that was a big thing, to make an effort to befriend normal drinkers, normies, and sober people, because my entire social life was people who drank to excess, or, and that's their decision to make, not mine. But I sought it out. And even in terms of connection, I would seek out whoever was staying to have another drink. So it wasn't even real. And that's hard. It's still hard to feel that stuff. It's worth it though. It's okay that it's hard, and it's a lot better than it used to be, for sure. But it's not to say it's all fixed.
That reminded me of a concept that you talk about in the book that was like, oh, it like resonated through my whole body, which was like the concept of the vanish. Like if you're at a place, if you're at a party and you're not feeling it anymore, you can just leave. You can vanish. And I am certainly not the only person that I know who doesn't drink, but I have lots and lots of friends who do. And there is generally a point at every party where you can tell that the kind of the lines are starting to blur and people are starting to get drunk and kind of saying the same things over again. And like, that's my cue. I'm like, okay, time to vanish. And that's totally fine.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, that no one cares.
Mm-hmm.
That was huge for me. But no one cares. The next day, they don't even know. Nobody's paying that much attention to when I leave the party, that was revelatory.
It can certainly feel that way though. I remember I used to, and I am like at my heart of hearts, a big people pleaser. And I am so concerned about hurting other people's feelings. So that took a lot of effort to just be able to tell myself, if you're in a place that you no longer want to be for whatever reason, you can just leave and people will understand. So thank you for including that in the book, because I think that that's something that a lot of us struggle with. And it was almost like writing about it felt like a permission, like, oh, you can do this if you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think that section of the book too, that little chapter, was at the heart of what you're saying. Like Amanda and I have talked endlessly about this because we are also people pleasers. And that was something I would not have admitted that years ago. I would have said I was confident and did what I wanted. Meanwhile, deep down, I was constantly calculating, like, who needs what from me? How can I stay in everyone's good graces? Like, I deeply, deeply cared. So to liberate yourself from that as part of sobriety is, I don't know, in some ways, Amanda and I would wonder if that was bigger than the sobriety itself, was learning to stop people pleasing.
It drives you to drink when you're in that state.
Oh my God. And each time I went back after my little 3 month, I would try 3 months off and stuff. And each time I went back, it was usually to please like a group. It was somebody's birthday and I didn't want her to feel weird that I wasn't drinking. And I look back now and I'm like, wow, that, because I have changed. Once you figure that stuff out and you start untangling it, you can take the knots out.
Well, they say that stopping drinking doesn't solve your problems. It just puts you into a state where you're better able to deal with them. And that's so true. Like, I certainly did not stop being a people pleaser just because I stopped drinking. I was just hyper aware that, oh, wow, so much of what I do is catered to making other people happy and comfortable, even if it's at the expense of my own comfort or happiness.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's a great example. I have to say that I see my kids choosing themselves, and I'm so proud when my son shows up at 1 a.m. and is like, "I just left the party. It wasn't fun. I drove myself home." And then recently, or I guess it was about 6 months ago, I was headed out the door with my husband to a literary party, and he's a geologist, and so we were getting ready, and I said, "Okay, ready to go?" And he said, "I'm not going to go." I thought, damn, but good for you. I see what you're doing. I've been doing that for years, And he was like, "I just don't want to go." I said, "You know what? Good job. I see it changing everyone around me." And I went and had a great time, and he got in his pajamas.
I love that. There are so many different ways to go from stuck to unstuck. But one of the most productive, learning. Learning something new can help you expand your skill set and find new interest, and in the process, help you get unstuck. And if you want to learn something new, you will definitely want to check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes designed to help you learn, grow, and tap into your creativity, all of which can help you make the journey from stuck to unstuck. And right now, Skillshare is offering a free month to new members. If you want to access Skillshare's entire library of classes and get the education and instruction you need to shake off the stuckness, just visit seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare and sign up for your free trial today. Again, that's seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare. So we've obviously been talking about this a bit, but the whole theme and point of being a sober lush is living this full, present, embodied, sensuous, joyful, adventurous life. So, as you've made this journey to like embodying sober lushness, what have been some of your favorite experiences that felt especially lushful for you?
I've had a bunch. I mean, some of them are small. Again, going back to like wanting extreme experiences, I discovered things like sensory deprivation tanks or float tanks and like lucid dreaming and all kinds of experiments with consciousness, like meditating, breath work. I used to think that that would be something that was really just about being well and healthy. And I didn't realize that it was about being generative, being psychedelic almost. And then travel. I used to think there was no point in traveling if I wasn't drinking. I've had the most beautiful trips. I went and hiked the Amalfi Coast with a friend, and we stayed in every little town on the way. And I was so alive every day. I was exhausted by the end of the day. We ate magnificent food. I fell asleep, slept deeply because we'd hiked for hours. And then I woke up fresh and alive. And that is my dream of traveling, like seeing everything and being present and talking to people and eating beautiful food. So I think those are two of my favorite examples.
That's beautiful. What about you, Amanda?
I would say, well, in terms of travel, yes, I just love it. And I have, I would say, a third more brain space to plan things and connect with things. And probably the biggest change for me is hearing heart. I hear myself all the time now. And I think I just wasn't hearing myself before. And now I hear what I want and I listen to it and honor it. And that's just a completely different way of living. And I'm so thankful that sobriety has brought me to that. And for example, in Mexico City, I used to stay out all night long, meeting random people in the bars. And the last time I was there, we're getting one in Austin, little cafes where you get a really good hot chocolate and people wander around with tiny cups of hot chocolate. And I did that and went to sleep and then woke up and did a morning bike in the center of Mexico City. They shut down all the traffic on the weekends or one day. And there I was biking as the sun came up thinking, this is what I get. It's so different and so glorious. And Jardine and I use the word true a lot, but it feels that way, as does my friendship with Jardine and a few other people. And it's just wonderful.
That's so beautiful. When I look back, it's so funny. You guys are talking, and I'm just like, oh, we are 100% on the same wavelength. I'm a writer, and I did a whole story on sensory deprivation tanks when I went and tried a bunch, and they were incredible. I will say, though, also a little bit scary at first. I am with you on that. But sound baths and breath work, and it's been so interesting for me as I removed alcohol as a coping mechanism, as a way to pass my time, as a comfort. The things that I've collected to then fill those same roles have been amazing and have expanded my life in so many ways. I like whether it's actual physical things. I am a huge fan of cold plunging. It's like my favorite thing in the world, which is bananas. If you had told me when I was drinking that I would be getting up at 6 a.m. to go jump into an ice cold river, I would have laughed in your face. And then, travel and being present with the people in my life. I've been married for 6 years. I've been together with my husband for 10, and he has never seen me drunk. when I share stories, he's like, that doesn't even sound like you. And I'm just like so grateful that the way that I now live my life, he never has to see that, which is great. And I can be present for our life together. In addition to, so we just talked about some like experience that's really kind of embody the sober lushness. But in terms of the ways that it has changed your life and the gifts or the benefits that you've received, what do you feel have been the most transformative since you've embraced this sober lush lifestyle?
I think, Amanda, you saying that you believe you have a third more space in your brain is so true. I literally feel that I have that much more bandwidth in just daily reckoning with reality, with, like you said, being present with the people in your life. And then also with work, with creative work, I can do so much more. And I think for me, being sober, I had to recognize how much I kept thrashing my nervous system. Like hangovers would be intense the next day, but I think the overall wear and tear on my poor little soul was pretty extensive. And I believe in risk taking in your work and in your life. I think now that I'm just more whole and take better care of myself, I live out in the middle of nowhere in the desert right now, which is just a huge leap of faith. And I absolutely love it. I've taken on creative projects I never dreamed of. I can handle rejection better. That's part of risk is things are going to fail. But because I'm just, again, more cared for and in one piece, I can handle it. It hurts for a day. And instead of it slowing me down for months, I bounce back and go to it. So I think those are the major pieces that I think about constantly. I think about them every day.
What amazing gifts. What about you, Amanda?
I think the biggest thing for me is that I work on being kind to myself. That's still something I'm getting toward, but I'm proud of myself. And drinking brought me so much shame. And every day I just feel free of that. And I feel like I can make any choices. I'm in the middle of a big family, and there's a lot of ways to fail people. I can't go to the volleyball game and the show and do my work all the time. But I don't feel that struggle as much anymore because I'm proud of myself for being sober and being present. And so I feel okay saying no to things. I feel okay, saying to my kids, I'm done. I can't handle another minute of this. I'm so proud every day to be free of alcohol. And that has changed my life.
That's incredible. I loved what you said about the shame because I think that as much as alcohol and the actual drinking can keep us stuck, the shame associated with it can also be such a huge stuck point, and it can be so hard to get unstuck when you're kind of mired in shame.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the reasons this book was so important to us to write is that we had read a lot of memoirs of people whose lives got really dark and they got out. But a lot of those books end when they get sober. And I feel like there is a period, and I hope that all listeners will hear this, where it's just really hard, and it feels like it'll be that hard forever. For me, the shame was crashing in, physical things, I just felt way more anxious, and you haven't changed anything yet. But that first period of moving things around leads you to this, for me, a paradise, a life without shame, without angst and doom. The feeling of doom I always had is gone. I also went on Lexapro, which helps too. It does.
No, believe me, I there's like that Glennon Doyle who is a other podcaster. She sings a little song about how much she loves Lexapro, and that just came into my mind when you were
Yeah, yeah.
saying that.
I just try to be honest because I feel like I needed to hear
Yes.
a lot of things. I needed to hear the way out.
Yes, and like to normalize, I really appreciate what you said about it being really hard because it's similar to like when you watch a romantic comedy and then it ends when they get married and happily ever after. And there is a transition period. Like, obviously, if you are a problem drinker and you're struggling with problematic drinking, stopping drinking is like a huge pivotal moment that can set you on the path from stuck to unstuck. But you don't necessarily wake up the next morning and it's sunshine and roses and all the good things. There is a period of work that needs to be done, but there is also, once you get through that, so much beauty on the other side. And I feel like your book does such an incredible job of painting that picture of what things can be like when you give up alcohol. So, was there a moment after you stopped drinking and kind of as you navigated that period of toughness? Was there a moment when you realized, oh my gosh, I'm not stuck? Things are different now? Or was it a more gradual experience?
I have a crazy moment. When I got sober, I had this, I sort of believed certain things. And one was that I needed to hit the Times bestseller list so I could take my kids traveling. And I just had that stuck in my head. And book after book, I didn't hit the Times bestseller list. So I thought, I can't take my kids on a trip, which was my dream. And then learning to get sober, I started moving, I sort of unstuck myself from these tautologies. And I realized, wait a minute, why don't I take them to Europe and write a book set in Europe? And that's when I got the idea to set a book on a cruise ship because I thought that would be fun. And so my editor said she was interested, and I set the book on a cruise ship. And I took my kids on the cheapest cruise imaginable from Athens to Barcelona and had what was probably one of the best weeks of my life, sober on a cruise ship. Wrote this novel, The Jet Setters, about a person trying to get sober on a cruise ship. And then it was picked by Reese Witherspoon and hit the Times bestseller list. And I remember hearing that on a walk with my dog, and like the sun was shining, and I thought, they say wait for the miracle, and this is what it is. Like, I would never have gotten there if I hadn't gone first to rerouted that stuck, um, you know, plan to say, well, why don't I go embrace the pleasure now? And then who knows? So that was,
I got chills when you were saying that. What an incredible
I got
moment.
chills. Yeah.
What about you, Jardine?
I think I still have moments of realizing I'm not stuck in certain patterns because, like you said, there's sobriety and then there's all the things that made up whatever the drinking problem was. I think for me, I had a New Year's Eve party that happened shortly after, within a year of getting sober. And it's so hard for me to even remember being this frantic, but I was, to go and also to be able to leave without doing anything and without relapsing. I had my car parked out on the road so that I could leave very quickly. I thought all these things through. Like, I have no idea why I didn't just not go, but it was so important to go and to be able to show myself that I could do it. Driving home that night and then waking up the next morning where I had fun-ish, but I was also just in one piece for the first time ever. I mean, New Year's Eve used to be like the bomb of the year. I was just giddy, and I think it opened the dam for, like, you can do anything. If you survived New Year's Eve, you can do anything. It was, yeah, the ultimate hurdle for me in a certain kind of almost silly way. I think it symbolized all of my socializing, all of potential for falling in love, like all these things that when I first got sober, I thought I was giving them away. And I didn't.
That's huge. I love that. Cheers to more moments like that.
Yes.
So, for people who might be listening, who are feeling stuck, maybe they're drinking too much, maybe they're drinking too often, maybe they feel like their drinking is moving out of their control and they're considering giving up alcohol. What advice would you give them for embracing this concept of a sober, lush lifestyle and getting unstuck in the process?
I think I had to believe that I deserved joy. I sort of assumed or that I couldn't have it. And I think that for a lot of people, it's just that alcohol is bringing them sadness. And that's enough. That's enough reason to quit. And it's enough reason to give yourself joy. And you can do it.
Beautiful.
I would say on a technical side, I had a therapist who helped me realize what was happening, and I will be forever grateful to her. I ended up doing an intensive outpatient because I had tried to get sober. I probably knew in my late 20s that I didn't want to drink the way I was drinking. Nobody in my life called me an alcoholic. Nobody thought I needed to quit. I even had friends who were disappointed that I quit. But I, at that point, needed to hear voices telling me in real life, in the same room where I was standing, that I was doing the right thing. I can't overestimate how important it is to have people help you. And for me, it really was about people in the room. So I did a little bit of that. I did a little bit of 12 step. I did that thing of take what I want, leave the rest. I think that's becoming more and more accepted, to do whatever it takes for you to be able to get sober. Now there are so many books. There are great podcasts. There was nothing when I was first trying to do this. There are support groups online and in person. And then I think it's just, Amanda and I've talked about this also, the things that were hidden in plain sight. Like that idea that you left in Miami, this party that you were kind of done with, and the beach was right there. It was right there the whole time. To me, that's the ultimate metaphor for, there were so many things hidden in plain sight for me. I was terrified of being bored. If I got sober, there were a million things to do. I just couldn't see them. So looking at life in a different way and being patient, because it takes a minute. It takes a minute to undo the stuck. It does. And to get out of all those pathways that we're so used to traveling.
What beautiful pieces of advice. Know that you deserve joy. Surround yourself with people that validate and support you. Know that there is no singular right way to quit drinking. You have to forge the path that works for you. Yeah, those are all such beautiful pieces of advice. And I think for me, my addition would be really compassionate with yourself, because quitting drinking can be a hard thing. And so show yourself a lot of love, a lot of understanding, a lot of compassion, and trust yourself that you can do it. Hmm. Well, this conversation has been amazing. Thank you both so much. Here at Season of Stuck, we have a little round of questions that we end all of our episodes with. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to ask you both just a few more questions.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
sounds good.
perfect. So, first question. If you think about your ideal future self, if she could travel back in time and talk to the current version of you right now, what advice do you think she would give you on how to navigate stuckness at this point in your life?
Even though I just said, ask for help, I still probably don't do that as much as I could, should, would love to. So I think, getting out of my introverted little soul and just asking without even knowing what I'm asking for, just asking for help all the time.
Love that. How about you, Amanda?
That's advanced, Jardine. I'm not even near that. I think just I would tell myself, I would say, to just let some of it go. I mean, I am such a control freak. I'm so worried about missing something and doing something wrong. And I hope that I will want to say to myself, just let it go. It's going to be okay.
Those are such great pieces of advice. And it's so funny. The more times that I ask people this, every single time I feel like the advice their future selves give to them is also advice for me. So
That's a
thank
great
you.
question.
I also need to remember to let go of control and ask for help. And I know that a lot of other people do too. So thank you, future Amanda. Thank you, future Jardine. And then the next few questions are just kind of like a rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you a question and you just say the first thing that pops into your mind. Okay. So, favorite movie of all time?
I like this movie called The Passenger with Jack Nicholson, and
Mm.
it's from the 70s, and it has the best plot ever. And it's got the. Have you ever seen it? Have you ever seen it?
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
It's
a long
great.
time ago,
It's
though.
so great.
I will add it to my list. How
It's
about you,
sexist
Jardine?
as hell.
I'm going to say Fantasia because I think it was the first movie I ever saw in a theater. And I can't even, I haven't seen it in many years, but I remember it was like that first moment of movie magic where I was like, what? What is this?
That movie is so magical. Okay. Go to coffee order.
Black coffee, hot,
Ooh.
hot black coffee.
Nice choice.
Dirty chai with oat milk. And I wish I was a black coffee person. I think that's so much cooler. But
It's not cool. I'm just a cheapskate.
If you could have any animal in the world as a pet, what would it be?
I want a German Shepherd because I want to feel safe.
Cute.
I would love a gray fox if I lived in some kind of Fantasia world. Yeah.
Wow.
Also a good one. I don't know if you've ever seen any videos of this, but I guess when you tickle foxes, they laugh, and it's maybe the cutest thing in the entire world. So highly suggest you hop on YouTube if you like foxes and check that out.
I will definitely do that. Yeah.
And then last question. Best concert you've ever been to?
I'm just going to say band in excess. At the Meadowlands.
That sounds like it would be a great show.
It was a great 90s moment.
I saw Run DMC at a little club once, and that was awesome.
Ooh, especially seeing them in like a small venue where it's like more of an intimate. Oh, that must have been so fun.
That's incredible.
Well, great answers. Thank you again both for being here. This conversation was so helpful to me and enlightening for me. And I know it will be the same for people listening, particularly if they are struggling with the decision to quit drinking. So if people listening want to connect with you, if they want to find you, how can they do that?
Well, I was raising my hand because I wanted to add.
Yes.
I am a part of a secret group on Facebook called the BFB and Booze Free Brigade. You friend a picture called Elizabeth Cloud. It's a picture of a penguin. You friend that to join. And it is people who are struggling. It is people who have just gotten sober. It kept me sober. I would text from the bathroom at a party. I would text as I was walking into a dinner, and I would have in my pocket, 10 friends there for me. It is the most incredible group, primarily women. So great. So that's called the BFB. And I'm also at amandaward.com. That's my email on there.
Amazing. Thank you.
My easiest is probably Instagram, Jardine Libaire Projects. And we're also at the Sober Lush.
The Instagram, yeah. It's at the Sober Lush.
Yeah, at the Sober Lush.
Perfect. Thank you both again. This has been so fantastic. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. It really was lovely.
That's it for today. A huge thank you to our guests for their incredible insights, and a huge thank you to you, our listeners. We know that there are so many podcasts out there to choose from, and we are just so grateful that you chose ours. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider recommending the podcast to a friend or family member that you think would enjoy it. And to make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you loved the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It plays such a huge part in getting this podcast out to a wider audience and ultimately supporting more people on their journey from stuck to unstuck. And to keep in touch and access even more stuck-related content, follow us on Instagram at Season of Stuck and visit our website, seasonofstuck.com, where you can sign up to get episodes delivered directly to your inbox. Thank you again for being here. It is so, so appreciated. Until next time, I'm Deanna deBara, and you're listening to Season of Stuck.